right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Veterans Psychedelic Discourse. We're a group that advocates for safe and responsible exploration of mental health treatments. This is not a platform for soliciting any illegal substances. So for this month, our guest is Jared Rinehart with Heroic Hearts. He's a Marine Corps Infantry veteran who got exposed and experienced psychedelics before heading back into private contracting, and turned to ayahuasca to find new tools to help him deal with deep feelings of anxiety, depression, anger after his time in service. Through the help of ayahuasca and healing center in Peru, he was able to find a new state of mind that transferred his perception of the world around him. This experience led him to become a lead integration coach for the nonprofit organization Heroic Hearts, which aims to help veterans access psychedelic medicines. Welcome, Jared. I gave a brief little back history of yourself. For those that are unfamiliar with Heroic Hearts and Jared, I'll be posting right now into the chat box previous videos of Jared and then also Jesse Gould. Can you give us a quick brief back history of yourself, Jared?
Yeah, so the bio that you just read kind of covers most of it, but for myself, I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years. I was in the infantry. I got out in 2011. When I got out, I was, like most veterans, having a very hard time integrating back into normal civilian life. And so for myself, the solution to that was not to integrate or get a job or anything else. It was to, substance abuse issues, alcohol, all these types of things to try to cope with the sheer idea of the separation of being in the Marine Corps. That didn't work out, as we all probably most know, is so my relationships were failing. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't do a lot of those things. So I became a private military contractor because the only place that I felt normal was back in that state with in overseas or in a military-esque environment. So while I was a contractor for about 4 years, I was on and off between Afghanistan and Iraq. During that time, I would come home and I would have about 30 days of leave a year, and during that time I'd come home and I would party with my friends and I'd hang out and I'd do those things. We would always kind of in the end do psychedelic at the end of my experience in the States. So I was kind of working up with these experiences, and I had my first DMT experience, I think back in 2015. And that really blew my mind and altered a whole different state for myself. And that led me down to want to research ayahuasca. So when I went back to my contract in Iraq, I was studying and researching, and I found a wonderful center down in Pucallpa, Peru, who offered to facilitate a few ceremonies for me. So in April of 2016, I went down to Peru and I had 4 ayahuasca ceremonies with a Shipibo-led ceremony. This experience, for lack of a better term, altered the whole perspective of reality for me, not just my life, but reality and as a whole, and my place in it, and everybody's place in it at that point. And so surprisingly, I went back to Iraq after this experience. After a week after this experience, I went back to that job, which is because where I lived and where I worked at the time. And I stayed out in Iraq for about 10 months before I decided that I just didn't really want to be a contractor anymore. And it wasn't that I was anti-war or anti-military or any of these things. I just felt like my time was done, and I had completed what I needed to complete. So again, not really wanting to go back to integrate in the States, I decided that I was going to move to the Amazon jungle and learn from the healers out there, curanderos out there, about this medicine and the plants. So I stayed with the Shipibo tribe on this center for about a year and helped facilitate and apprenticed under the curanderos out there and learned about these medicines and these plants. At the last month of that time out there, I had a veterans retreat I was invited to. And when I was invited to that veterans retreat, I met Jesse Gould. And Jesse Gould is the founder of Heroic Hearts Project. And at that retreat, we became good friends. And he asked me, he said, "Hey man, if I need your help, can I get your help when I start this nonprofit?" And I said, "I'll be there if you need me." So in 2018, he called me up and said, "Hey Jared, we need an integration coach." And I'm not gonna lie, when he said that to me, I was like, "What's an integration coach?" Because I had no idea about that whole field of structure. So he explained it to me. I went through some training, and then I became the one and only coach for Heroic Hearts Project, and that was back in 2018. Now I am the director of the integration program for Heroic Hearts Project, and we have just under 25 coaches that are in our staff now working with Heroic Hearts. Heroic Hearts is an organization that brings veterans in and sends them to work with these plants and these indigenous healers down in Peru and Mexico. We have a pretty robust program that involves 3 integration calls one-on-one and 3 group calls one-on-one before they go down for about 3 weeks. And then when they get home, about a month and a half to 2 months of one-on-one coaching and group coaching to help them integrate their experience. We've had amazing results with this program. Most of our information we have is anecdotal, but we are in the thick of it as far as the research being shown. What we've had, I would say, out of we have about a 90% rate of overall better life for veterans that come to our program and go through our program fully.
How often are you Heroic Hearts sending groups of people to Peru?
Right now we are this year we've been doing 2 retreats a month, so that's about 20 to 25 veterans a month that we're sending down to Peru and Mexico.
That's a pretty pretty quick turnaround. I recently got a notification because I did sign up to be sent out. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it just from my schedule, but it all said was make sure you have your passport ready to go and updated. And yeah, so if anyone's interested, definitely check out their website. I dropped a link and see if that's an option that you're looking for. So it was DMT that you experienced first before even touching ayahuasca? Okay,
Yes,
so that
true.
was kind of like cracking open that box.
Yeah, so that experience for me was done in a friend's apartment, actually my ex-girlfriend's
Wow.
apartment at the time, in
Mhm.
Seattle, where that happened. And so when that happened, it was the first psychedelic experience I ever had where I was fully out of my body, and completely immersed into a different landscape. And that landscape felt so familiar and felt like home and felt like love and compassion. And I felt like I was being held by what I could call mom, is what it felt like, just
Mhm.
being held like a baby from mom. And surprisingly enough, I actually was so deep in this experience that it was the first time I ever taken a psychedelic and forgot that I had taken a psychedelic. It was so profound that I was so immersed in this that I was like, and then when I felt the chemical wearing off on me, I was like, oh yeah, I'm in this DMT experience, and this thing, this feeling, this intelligence I'm speaking to, or that's speaking to me, is must be what people call God. So I rattled off about every question I would ever have for God at that point, and it seemed to laugh and smile at me. If it had a face, it would be smiling. And then told me if I have questions, I need to go to the jungle, which is what inspired the ferocity of my investigation into what was in the jungle and ayahuasca and all that stuff.
Coming from this, I could definitely empathize, at least a little bit from your experience, also being infantryman for the Marine Corps, and it's a very intense, high energy culture and experience. And I'm just trying to imagine going from that and then having a DMT experience, exploring something like ayahuasca, and then going back into a combat zone. These experiences, while you're still having to return back to combat, how did these experiences have an effect on your perception of just life in the world, and like what was going on inside of you while you were returning back to combat?
So when I was returning back to contract, I'm not gonna lie to you. There was a part of me that was going like, how am I supposed to bring this back to my team out there, to the guys I worked with? I mean, like when I was in Peru, I had a realization that I had not hugged another human being for about 9 months. and I was like, in that alone was like the culture, as you know, like there's not a lot of empathy, there's not a lot of love being expressed. There is love, but it's underneath the surface and usually buried under a lot of jokes and other things that come along with it. So when I left the jungle, the three things that I learned from my last ceremony was that I need to go into the world with unconditional love, unconditional trust, and unconditional acceptance. And at the time, I had no idea what that meant, but I was determined that if I could figure out how to do it in Iraq, I could do it anywhere. So when I went out there, it changed the whole perspective I had for life. I started to really connect with my interpreters and start learning more about the community of Iraq. I started seeing the Iraqis more as people and not Iraqis. I started seeing the contractors I was working with not as contractors or, a role they were playing, but as people. And I started being much more open and vulnerable to them about my process, about my emotions, and about other things going on. And in return, I started to see that they also were opening up to me in that sense. So our conversations got deeper, our friendship got more solidified, and I could really feel the love between not just the people I worked with on a team, but with the community of Iraqis that we were serving out there on that contract. It really was a profound experience to watch, as even in this place that I was, always on alert, that it went from feeling like I was on a contract to feeling like I was at home. And that was something that was very profound for me. And that's, I think, also what was a major decision for me to leave Iraq, because I just didn't want to be the one asking for a fight anymore.
That makes sense.
I was wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit. You kind of casually glossed over spending a year in Peru. And I was wondering if you might reflect on that a little bit and talk a bit about some of the lessons you learned, because that just seems like, just what a one of a kind experience. Like, just love to know what you took away from it.
I feel very privileged to have the choice to be able to do that, because as a contractor, I had a lot of money that I wasn't going to. I didn't have a house or kids or a family back home that I was supporting. So I was single and had the ability to leave and do this. So when I moved to Peru, as being a veteran, and I think that most veterans, even on the call or that are hearing this, would understand, is I'm a man of service. I want to give back to things that I feel are giving something to myself, whether that be my country, my community. And I felt like this medicine and this medicine community really impacted my life. So my decision to go back down there was mostly to try to serve others, and also in the hopes of helping another veteran that may be going through this process, because there is a language that veterans speak, body language, physical and emotional language that we speak, that it's hard to get through for a lot of people. So when I went down there, I expected a left seat, right seat job training thing, like, oh, well, I'm going to learn about the plants and they're going to give me these things to read and all that stuff, the Western way of doing things. But as I learned down there, they don't work like that. They basically said, if you want to learn about ayahuasca, you need to drink ayahuasca. So part of the process for me down there was I was drinking ayahuasca 3 to 5 times a week. When I was out there doing this, I was working with plants and doing diets in isolation, and learning on my own, not from anybody else, but learning from my own direct experience about what these plants do and how they have their own intelligence involved with them, that I was not privy to. And I'm not going to lie, I was very skeptical about a lot of things when they told me about this is how it works and this is how, like, spirits and this and that. And I was like, well, I'll find out for myself. And as I found out that these words that they use are the only words that are easy to bridge, but we in the West may call it energy or, vibration, when they call it spirits or ancestors or other things. So it was really a matter of learning about that. And through that process, it was a very humbling experience, because it's a lot of self-work that went involved. So there was a lot of deep work that I had to do on myself in order to receive these messages from these experiences that would open me up to more of that. So learning from the curanderos and learning how they even learned their healing songs was incredible to me. Like, I thought that someone taught them and then they sang them and all these things. But again, they would sit in isolation for a certain amount of time and diet a plant. And a plant diet includes basically almost a fast. You're eating very, very little. There's not a lot of nutrients in the food that you're eating, so probably like rice and boiled vegetables at the most. And you're eating once a day, and you are in isolation, and then you drink or eat a small amount of this plant, so like a root or a leaf or something of this plant, and then you are in your isolation for a certain amount of time. And during that time frame, you will have, sometimes these plants are psychoactive, sometimes they're not. The non-psychoactive plants and even the psychoactive ones usually communicate with you within your dreams, and you wake up and you would journal about it, or you'd write about it, or you'd something. And this is how these curanderos would learn these healing songs, is because the plants would give them a tune and words to use in order to call them into the space to be able to do these certain healings on people. And even saying it now, it makes my Westerner skin crawl, because it just doesn't make any sense, but it's just how it works.
So it just naturally comes from them, or to them, from the experience with the medicine, instead of it's like kind of like a Hail Mary passed down through generations or something like that.
And
I like that.
It's a mix of the two, to be honest, because these lineages come down from families as well. So they've been raised in it, they've been living in it. So they get some of these understandings, but I think that there's less of a skeptical block that they have to get through to get these messages more than someone like myself.
That makes sense. As a person that is facilitating, and like you were saying, how you were told if you were to know this experience, you have to drink the ayahuasca. How many times have you taken ayahuasca?
I lost count a long time ago. It's over
300?
Over 100 at this point. I don't know.
So do you, the reason why I'm asking is because I don't see exactly how I'm going to fit into this space, but I see myself getting into the facilitation space, working with veterans as well. And I've gone through different medicines to kind of figure out my own stuff, go through baggage, my own insecurities, everything. And I got to a point that I feel that I have so much that I know that I need to work on now, that I'm not compelled to go into, I haven't had ayahuasca, but like into DMT or like a heroic dose of psilocybin or something like that. It doesn't really interest me. Someone that's actually facilitating and doing this type of work, do you feel that it's a must to continue to go into these trips to make sure that you still have I don't know, a recent experience of understanding the space? Or do you think that that's maybe not so necessary? I want to get some input from you. What do you think?
I personally think that these medicines will really help you do your own inner work, and that will help you become a better facilitator. Do I think it's necessary for a facilitator with, say, psilocybin or LSD or MDMA to be constantly taking these? No, I don't think that's necessary. But if you're going to be working within the shamanic space that is occurring down in the jungle with these kinds of energies, it is vitally important that people consider that it's not just a weekend course you can take on Zoom to learn how to hold space, that these plants have their own intelligence and work with you in certain ways. So in order for, like, for instance, again, this is from my own direct experience. There are times when just touching someone in ceremony, and I haven't had any ayahuasca in my system, and suddenly now I am purging because their energy has transferred into my energy, and now I am now vomiting next to them because they're that kind of stuff. And these are what diets will help clean out that energy in that sense. So with ayahuasca, I think it does take some preparation, and it's not just something you can do over a month or two in the jungle. These curanderos, the indigenous that have been doing this, they've been doing this for 10 plus years of diets and isolation in the jungle, dedicating their entire being to this healing art. So it's not just something that I think that we as Westerners can really jump into, even though we really want to, because it's not something we have really put our minds around. But again, with the use of psilocybin and other types of medicine, it can be similar, but I don't think that you're using the same type of art that they're doing. We are giving more over to the medicine the chemicals of it, to the idea of it, and then having traditional therapy, which is a huge thing that we can do in our society as well. But in the jungles of Peru, they're not sitting there with an eye sheet over you, tasking you to talk about what's going on or helping you through a situation. They're pulling literal energy out of you and disposing of it, instead of you having to go through the long, hard work of talk therapy.
I got a question for you. Like, I know that we view the use of these entheogens as therapeutics, and we have our own Western way of approaching it, like you just talked about. I'm curious what like the indigenous perspective is on the role of these medicines. How do they view them? I know that like there's a village in Peru that got popularized in the 60s with mushrooms, and they describe them as just using them as like tools for personal health rather than personal discovery. So I'm curious what your take on that was.
Well, I think you said it right, was tools is a way of looking at it, depending on the tradition. So in the Shipibo tradition, they primarily use ayahuasca as a diagnostic tool. So the healer would drink it and be able to diagnose what is going on with a person's energy and be able to help them move it, shift it, get rid of it, whatever they need to do with it at that point. There was a time before all of this that we all were allowed to drink ayahuasca, when only the curandero was allowed to drink ayahuasca, and the person getting healed would be receiving the songs, and the healings would still occur according to what I've heard from the stories down there. I have never experienced that, but I will say that you not being in the medicine, like on ayahuasca in a space while it's going on, you can feel this vibration, this energy moving through your body and inside of your own consciousness while they are singing. So it's definitely something that is a pretty far out concept, but it's one of those things that I think that we should tread lightly. In my perfect world, it'd be one of those things where we in the West bring the indigenous healers up here to teach us how they do it, instead of us trying to figure out our own method for using these medicines, because they've been using these traditions for thousands of years, and our Western medicine's only been around for a couple hundred.
Yeah. I worried about the consequences of unearned wisdom. It seems like these are people that have really earned the wisdom they have, and we're just trying to fit it into what we do, so.
Yeah. And to kind of reiterate again on their tools, and depending on the intention behind the tool user, they can be used for many things. So the Shipibo use them for diagnostic tools. Other people use them for introspection. Other people use them to connect with the divine. Other people use them for nefarious purposes as well. And we've heard horror stories on the internet and everything else about these people using psychedelics or entheogens as a tool to manipulate or a tool to harm other people. So just like anything that we have at our disposal, these are definitely tools. I mean, the Vikings ate mushrooms before they went into battle. So it really, and we all know about the Manson family using LSD to brainwash these people to do certain things that they normally wouldn't do. So setting, and intention is what's most important, and also who is the one that is giving the medicine out.
Last year that we had you, you mentioned that there was going to be a study conducted involving brain scans and whatnot. Do you have any updated context that you'd be able to share with us?
Yes. Last month, actually, we just completed 2 studies, and they were with 2 retreat centers. One of them was with the Ayahuasca Foundation, and then one of them was with the Beckley Foundation down in Jamaica. And the Beckley Foundation was a psilocybin study that we did on traumatic brain injury in veterans. We had a cohort of about 13 veterans that went, and they conducted brain scans, they did blood tests, they did a bunch of other type of neurological tests while they were out there during and all this. So we don't have the research yet. We don't have the data, but the data has been collected, and now the rigorous process of going through that data has occurred. Now with the Ayahuasca Foundation, also last month, we did a gut biome study. So we did stool samples, urine samples, and blood samples before, during, and after their experiences, to not like they did a stool sample during the experience, but like in the middle of the retreat. So they did before, during, and after samples, so that way we could get those studies, that data up, and studied also to test what is going on with the gut biome of a human being during this process.
The whole gut biome, what makes me think of that is, again, I haven't never done ayahuasca. I've just had N DMT, not even 5-MeO. And I got to be honest, I feel like I have been given enough to work on from these tools, that the whole process that involves throwing up and diarrhea, I don't see it to be much of a necessity. Now, I feel like something, a veteran that maybe in just like the darkest pit of their PTSD and depression might see this as an option. But I imagine there's a whole lot of lack of context. This whole psychedelic therapy is very taboo still. We're trying to change that stigma. But for someone that is not in the know, not as experienced, and almost ignorant to this idea, like, what would you say to someone that's considering an alternative form of healing that might be hesitant because of the taboo?
Well, first of all, I would say please do your own research and ask around to people that you may know that have done it. And if you're asking me, if you're looking at me as an example for what happened, if you knew me before I drank ayahuasca to now, the results speak for themselves. There's no story I could tell you about it, but I will say, for me, my ayahuasca experiences have not always been pleasurable. It's not, if you're going to drink ayahuasca, for instance, and hoping for like a fun time in the jungle, do not go drink ayahuasca. It is not a pleasurable, fun experience, but it is some of the deepest and most profound work a human being can do on themselves, because it is so difficult. It is so very hard for us to only match or to dig into our own suffering and our own stuff that's going on, that just the idea of extra suffering on top of it, if that can deter you, you probably shouldn't go drink ayahuasca. Now, there are other forms of medicines you can use, like MDMA or psilocybin, that may be less, they'd be much more gentle for that person. And I would direct them in that direction as well, because it's not always, it doesn't have to be that deep.
Sure. Yeah, I could totally see that. With most psychedelics, I could see it just being, it's not so much a pleasurable experience, it's a challenging threshold that you find joy afterwards. You get perspective afterwards.
Absolutely.
It puts you through. Yeah, it's the crucible.
Yes, absolutely.
You had mentioned early on that you send people down there for 3 weeks.
Oh, no. We do 5 to 7 day retreats.
5 to 7 days. What does that look like? What would that be like for a vet?
So what our program entails is they would, first of all, like I said, they would get their information about when they are going, and then we would sign them up with an individual integration coach. And so they would then be doing individual integration sessions with that coach for 3 weeks prior to them going, helping them prepare and then getting on their diet, because ayahuasca is an MAOI and requires a special kind of diet. With us, we not only included the MAOI type diet, but we also include some dopamine fasting and other things, so that way we can start really bringing up into the process of what may be their coping style or skills that may not be working for them. So getting them really as raw and as in their own self as possible. Along with that, they'll have 3 group integration calls with their group, and then they'll go down to Peru or Mexico. And when we send them to Peru or Mexico, they would arrive, they'd meet their group, and then they would go down to the center for their first night. And then their first night, usually in Peru, they have this experience called vomitivo, which is a stomach cleansing tradition that they use in the Shipibo tradition to help kind of get you prepared for the ayahuasca experience. What this really entails is, if Alex, you probably know, like boot camp, make you drink water till it comes out. It's just drinking lemongrass tea till it basically comes out. And again, it's not a pleasurable experience, but it seems with veterans, we bond over non-pleasurable experiences. So a lot of people are laughing and having fun during this process. So after that, the next day, we would have basically like a talk about what's going to happen in ceremony, and then they would have ceremony that night. And then we do 3 back-to-back ayahuasca ceremonies, so one night after the other. something interesting about ayahuasca is there is no tolerance build up in the human being. So taking psilocybin 4 days in a row, it's going to be very light on that fourth day, if at all. So, but with ayahuasca, you can take ayahuasca every day, and it's actually, you have what's more like a reverse tolerance. So less actually equals more. So it's interesting to watch how this occurs. So we have them go through 3 ceremonies, which can be pretty exhausting, but are worth it in the end. And then on the 4th day, we have them rest. And then on the 5th day, we usually have a breakfast, and then they go back to the town where their hotel would be. And then they fly out that next day. Afterwards, they also have 3 integration calls with groups and their integration coach. So we don't leave them hanging, just going, hey, thanks for your time, and send them on their way. They have a support system with us when they get home.
Definitely. Yeah, that's definitely an important piece to have part of that. So I'm hearing this, and it's how long has this been going on with Heroic Heart, sending people to Peru?
Since 2018. Actually 2017, we were doing smaller groups when we were still kind of forming.
Okay, so we're 5 years out. I'm really excited for Oregon and just how laws are changing. We're making some progress on that front. What type of information can you share about Heroic Hearts' intention on providing something within the United States, within CONUS, within Oregon? Is there any plans? Is there anything that you could share with us on that front?
We would really love to do more things in the States, because I think it's a travesty that we have to send our veterans of the United States to other countries to get therapy that works. But until it's less of a gray area, we cannot pay for veterans to go do this, but we can assist in coaching, and we can assist in other types of methods of research and building things along the way. And it's not to say that we may not be able to work in Portland, because I think that we will eventually, but we just got to make sure that the legality of this does not interfere with our nonprofit status. So we are in full support and backing of what's going on in Portland right now, especially with the decriminalization of it. And we are still a part of trying to change the minds of congressmen and senators across the country about psychedelics, because as you may know, Alex, that veterans are nonpartisan. Both sides of the house, they want to support veterans. So our voice about our experience really makes a good headway for the politicians to want to make a difference. So that way we can get it to everybody, not just veterans, but the whole community, the whole United States, because it's not just us that are hurting, it's everybody.
Yeah, I definitely.
Have you found any advocates?
Where?
In like Congress, any elected officials that seem to have taken like a fonder view of this treatment?
We have along the way, like Senator Weiner down in I think that's his title, down in California, for instance, when you were trying to pass the bill in California, he was definitely a big advocate and supporter of us. And along the way, we have changed some minds and also raised some eyebrows along the way, because you're going to find that most politicians are not out to get psychedelics. Most of them don't even know what's going on with psychedelics. They don't even know, like when I say things like ayahuasca, psilocybin, ibogaine, they're like, what's that? They just, it's not even in their context. So a lot of this may be just an education form that comes to along the process. And as we know, in with any kind of government, it's just a slow moving process. But I think that we are showing in the nonprofit field and across the country, and Portland's a big example of this, that there is things moving and shaking, and that the voices are being heard.
Sure. I look forward to the future that the VA just sends people straight to you guys.
I hope so, or the VA wants to work with us and not just send them to us, or if they just even coming to us for advice on how to process this, because we are in this space, and we already have had conversations with the Portland VA about this topic of helping veterans with the psychedelic integration and all those things, because of what is going on with psilocybin in that area.
Right. Yeah. I'm loving what I'm seeing as far as like the SNAP lab at the Portland VA and just these different types of therapies in the works. So I mean, just thank God we have these studies because I can't help but feel that we're gonna have some really positive evidence to start to turn some heads and get people a little bit more focused on how much this could help people. What are some challenges? Is there much getting in the way as far as heroic hearts? Is it smooth sailing, or is there different types of obstacles that an organization such as this is regularly facing, or anything like that?
I think that most of the obstacles that we're facing, much like most nonprofits, is funding. And that's coming a lot from just getting our name out there, and also the taboo nature of psychedelics itself. So we're not just asking for funding. If we were just asking for funding for veterans, I think it'd be maybe a bit easier, but to reach certain donor pools, we also have to combat their idea of psychedelics or drugs itself. So we have to, it's a lot of conversations and a lot of getting to know people, and then also showing them the results of this so that way they can see it for themselves. So I think the biggest struggle that we probably go through is making sure that our name is out there, and that they know what we do, and that it's not just a leisurely retreat down to, you know, an exotic country for veterans. It's something that's really working.
Yeah, to be honest, it seems like you guys are sending quite a good reasonable amount of people to Peru all the time, but something that I don't seem to recognize, might be from just my failure, but does Heroic Hearts do a whole lot of like outreach for their own exposure? Because it seems like it's all about the work. I'm just curious because I don't hear too many people talk about it. I've met a couple people that know about Heroic Hearts, and I'm like, it seemed like you guys are one of the main organizations that are doing this work, and it kind of it surprises me, and I'm just curious on like, are you guys doing events for exposure, conventions, or anything like that to kind of just get word out, recruit facilitators, or get people to go on a trip to Peru, anything like that?
We are doing our own outreach and trying to get our name out there, but as I said before, funding can really get in the way of this. It's hard to host big galas or huge events like MAPS, for instance, without the money to back it. So
Sure.
without the funding for that, it's a little harder to get that out there. Now, in the future, we will be planning on doing certain things along those lines when the funding is there. But we've been mostly relying on basically an all volunteer organization out there, getting the word out, sending the stuff over on online presence, everything else. We have a presence on social media platforms and other things like that. But I also think that it's a fine line where we're not trying to shout our name from the mountaintops, but also to give credit to the medicine and to the work that's being occurred. Because we are just a platform that's available for these medicines. We have a program, but again, the indigenous people that we are supporting down in Peru and Mexico and the medicines itself are the ones that are doing the major amount of this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to take anything away from the work that's being done. It's just that I just get curious about if all the ears that need to hear this message are receiving the message. But yeah, I could see how the battle could kind of always be raging. Myself, I'm interested in being a facilitator. I'm in school right now. The VA is paying for me. I'm thinking about taking the therapy path to be licensed, and then do this alt path maybe afterwards. I'm kind of exploring this. I feel that being a veteran / psychedelic facilitator is a little bit niche right now, but I feel like it's starting to grow pretty quickly. For someone that's thinking about getting into this work and has done their own personal journeys, did some healing, but not quite sure where to start as far as being involved and to provide any type of service. Do you have any insights? I know you kind of ran into Jesse Gould out of country, but now that you have a little bit of context about this, I don't want to say industry landscape, do you have any advice for people that are looking to get in and involved?
Absolutely. I think one of the first places that someone can start looking into educating themselves on how to be a facilitator in this space, I think that learning about integration coaching will really help, because that will help you not only look at the full process itself of integration. It's not just about like what's going on in ceremony, or in practice, or in whatever words you'd like to use for the space with the certain medicines being taken. But I think that learning about that will really give you some more context on those things. And then I know you may know these more than I, but I have heard of certain organizations starting up facilitation trainings in Portland and other places around the country, not just over Zoom, but in person. These trainings are occurring. So making sure that you keep your ear to the ground in that. Also going to functions such as this and networking will get you an opportunity to, learn about the space and learn who has things available. It's a kind of an underground process still, as we all know, since the legality of it in the States has made it such an underground, but it's allowed underground. Everyone is okay to talk about it around each other and wants to bring more people into it. So my suggestion would be look around at your local meetups for psychedelics and look for the community that's around it, and you'll find where you can get your training and what will be the best result for you.
Yeah, I feel it might be it's somewhat, it doesn't take a long time, but I feel like considering if you're just now starting that path, maybe get into like peer support, even something that doesn't include medicines, just get to holding space with people and being able to talk them through their experience.
Totally. And Fireside Project, I'll give them a shout out right here, is a wonderful place to look into that for as well. They're getting a lot of presence right now in the space, and I'm really glad for that. What they do is they do peer support over the phone or over Zoom for those that are either integrating or in their experience and maybe having a tough time and need someone to talk to.
Yeah, Fire Festival does some pretty good work as well. We saw them at the psychedelic symposium that PPS hosted. I think you kind of spoke a little bit to this a little bit ago, but what are like some goals, visions for the future of the organization, even if the landscape isn't quite ready for it now? Do you guys already have some stuff in the chamber with a long fuse, kind of just waiting for the situation to develop, that you're able to speak about, or are you guys just focusing on the work that you guys have in front of you right now?
Well, we have a lot of stuff that we would like to move forward into, such as like we are adding more and more coaches to our integration program, for instance, and we want to provide more training for these coaches, as well as being able to learn how to hold space in a ceremonial setting or in that kind of thing. So we are looking into having that kind of thing moving forward. But as of right now, we are really trying to focus on getting our program as solid and as functional as possible. So we're really kind of building this race car as it's driving, is what it feels like a lot of times. So our main goal is we would love to be serving at least 365 veterans a year. So that would entail probably 2 to 3 retreats a month, which itself is a pretty robust program to keep up and running. And then once we have the funding and everything else, we can start branching into doing more community operated things, because we don't just want to heal and help the veteran community, but we want to build a community around this as well and give it back to the veterans that have helped us to kind of build this and see where they want to go with it.
Are you as of now still the lead in a integration coach?
Yes, I am.
How often are you in Peru in country?
I usually go to Peru or Mexico or both at least 2 to 3 times a year. As of right now, that's been the amount I've been able to go. I also have a family where I live and a life, so it's a bit harder for me to leave. But also being the lead integration coach, I have a lot of things going on that require my attention, that where I can't just take a week off, because one of the things that we require of not just our vets that we send down there, but to us, is that it's a zero technology retreat. So all of our phones and everything else go away. So I can't just answer emails or keep up with things that are going on when I'm gone in Peru for a week.
Sure, that makes sense.
I'm just amazed by that experience you had, being able to spend a year down in Peru. I mean, that's just like you have a book that you haven't written yet, you know?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Chaplain Candy.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Jared, thank you so much. I am I'm so excited to hear what all is happening, and I'm also a veteran, and I'm so grateful the help is there. And I was really struck by, as a chaplain, um, you mentioned about how, you came back, and the Western perspective does not always have that broader spiritual landscape, right? And as a chaplain, and having my own personal experience and professional experience, we operate in those non-ordinary states of consciousness and the mystical experience, and we hold for that. We hold that space for that. And I'm curious, both for your experience as well as those other veterans that come back and have had these expanded states of consciousness, if there's a space for that um, well-informed, knowledgeable spiritual exploration and integration. I mean, I would love to work with you, by the way, in some way. So I'd love to talk to you in some way. I already do integration for folks. And yeah, so there's a lot to talk about, but that was my initial question around that.
I would say yes, in a very careful way. I will tell you, as an integration coach myself, if my client is starting to open up to those concepts, I do not want to bring my beliefs into that open space of theirs. So I may give them references to certain holy books that I've read, or certain other types of mysticism or literature or philosophy that I may have gotten into. For myself, I will say that I was raised in not a like strict conservative religious environment. My parents were pretty open-minded, but my idea of spirituality was put into a box. It really was sitting into this box structure. And I think a lot of us that take psychedelics that convert that language into a spiritual type language start to break that box open and realize that it can't be held into a box. So that was the big structure for me, was that I feel like I have a very, very close and connected relationship with myself and my own spirituality, which can also be translated to a very connected relationship with the divine. And this is why I like that Brian uses the word entheogen. Connecting with the divine within is one of the ways that psychedelics can be used. And I feel like this experience at Heroic Hearts has opened this perspective for a lot of veterans. There has been veterans that I've worked with who were atheists, like staunch materialists, who didn't believe in anything other than what they could see or feel. And then after this experience, they were much more open-minded to the idea of something much bigger, or something that they didn't at least understand. So as you may know, psychedelics really remind me all the time is that, Jared, you do not know what's going on right now. And having that has been such a key point to branching out my mind to the concept of spirituality, because because I don't know. And that is powerful in itself, being saying like, well, maybe this, maybe that, I don't know. So it gives me more concepts to play with. And I think that having those concepts to play with, instead of marrying those concepts, which is what I've been taught to do, is you have a belief and you marry it and your belief and all these things, instead of playing with them, makes my life, and I think the other veterans that I work with, life a bit more open to the flow of whatever this is.
Right. Yeah. Veterans, I was sharing this, I think, last time we met, having worked with many veterans and being a veteran, that veteran spirituality is very different than the average person. We get that from our bond together in our community, and having each other's back. It's quite remarkable. So I hope you'll leave your contact information so I can reach out to you.
I will. Alex, thank you so much for having me on here. I mean, like, it's been a couple months when we planned on this, so I'm just saying thank you anyways. Like, this has been great.
I really appreciate you coming out. Last show was actually my exposure to the organization, and I was like, oh shit, no way. And I start looking and hearing organizations like vets and stuff. So I'm very excited just for what I have planned in my mind. Sometime in the future, I'd like to get it far enough so that we could get everyone in, but like Veterans of War, that's another organization, right?
Yeah.
Veterans of War, Heroic Hearts, vets. I want to get to these organizations, a couple people from there, and talk about just the landscape of services in the United States as things start to roll out and become decriminalized. I'm just curious on what type of plans people have. I think that veterans in this space are going to be the real variable that kind of gets people's heads to turn and to understand, like, oh, people with like really bad PTSD are able to reclaim their lives again. And so I think that's going to make people open their eyes to the idea of psychedelic therapies, as taboo as it might be based on religion or just culture and whatnot. I think that we could build a community of, focused on the results, which is people being able to continue to live their life and know where to put all their experiences rather than kind of bursting at the seams, so to speak.
Absolutely. We're tip of the spear, so to speak, of the movement, and there's been a lot more movement politically and in our own communities, not just politically, because the veteran voices are coming out with this. And as you know, Alex, and as anybody else that's in this community that's a veteran knows, is that like psychedelics are now being talked about a lot. It's not just underground anymore. Vets are coming home from their experiences, and who do vets listen to? Other veterans. So when their buddies or their best friends that were in the Marine Corps or the military itself with them tell them about their profound experience, and they see the difference in them, it's now everywhere. It's a huge topic amongst that, because we have lost faith in the VA and traditional medicine systems, and we're seeing results in these cases. So as always from the military, we have to be able to take care of ourselves. It's not the system that will take care of us.
Right. And yeah, I feel that, it's not that I want this just for veterans or anything. Brian has said it very well, in just that trauma is trauma. And it's just, I like this situation playing out with veterans specifically because of that tight-knit culture. I feel like word is going to spread like in the Lance Corporal underground, that it's just going to hit a lot of people. And I think it's just going to be, if someone heals from PTSD without any military experience, I don't really feel that would make the news, even if it should. But if you start having a swath of just people that were 100% disabled and, abusing alcohol and just in the worst place, making this turnaround, I'm so excited for people to realize, like, hey, this is something that we could actually just use responsibly. When I understand that the government and just these organizations probably are seeing, oh, they're going to be abusing it, and that's where the risk is going to be, and we're going to have this whole problem. But more understanding, more context, you realize that these aren't something that you really take recreationally to abuse to you're not trying to meet God because you're partying. So I think getting rid of the stigma and spreading the word, it's a slow unravel, but it's an exciting time to be alive, because I'm waiting for this to pop.
So can I just throw out one more thing? I love this. Thank you, Alex. And I am to speak to that, I'm about to go and speak at a chaplain's conference early in May. And I already was planning on mentioning that I was gotten involved with this group. And but I'm also going to mention Heroic Hearts. But I'm also involved in this group called Transforming Chaplaincy Psychedelic Care Network. So I've been in that for well over a year, almost a year and a half. And my own experience of working with trauma, being a veteran, and I said this, I think last time, is that it's striking to me why we get into the military. So had we had this trauma experience, trauma base, well before we even entered the military, that then proceeded to get into the military. And so that whole combination, so that we don't repeat those patterns. But moreover, I want the world to know that there are available resources to help walk through the trauma in a much smoother way. I mean, obviously, I've not done ayahuasca yet, but even what I have done, that's why I've avoided it, because I'm sure it's not going to be smooth. But what I'm saying, that it's doable. Where it's not always doable, you can't necessarily get to it by talking. So it's amazing, because I want other chaplains to know that this is available.
If I could leave the group with one small little story that I learned. You talk about, Brian, like my time down in Peru, man, I learned a lot. Working with people who weren't veterans. When I was in a different mindset, my friends at home that were civilians, they would come home and they'd be like, I had a bad day. And the first thing in my mind would be like, Lil, let me tell you about a bad day. You know, like, so I would compare trauma all the time. And this is something that was an issue for me, but working down with people of all walks of life, I started to realize that trauma was like a 10 scale, 1 out of 10, like 10 being the worst trauma you could ever experience, and, you know, 1 being nothing. For some of us who've experienced 10s already in our life, for other people, their 2s may be 10s for them, but 2s for us. So for myself, I had been through a lot of stuff in my life that made other people's trauma look like a 5 or a 6 on the 10 scale. So I would start comparing as if like they have no idea and that they're less than or anything else. But what I started to realize is that their 5 that I saw was a 5 was actually a 10 for them, and I should treat it as if it was that. So one of the things of holding space for people I've realized is that no matter if I feel like it's a worthy 10 or not, it's a 10 for them, and to treat it as if it was my worst, you know, trauma I've ever experienced in my life. And that helps me to hold space with compassion.
Sure. Yeah, it's especially I feel being in like a mental health space or facilitation and hearing a lot of people's stories, I feel like it might be over time easier for the ego to start making comparisons and try to get in the back of your mind that way. A question that me and Brian like to spitball with veterans that we speak to is, out of curiosity, what actually got you to walk into the recruiting office? And for myself, I think of just this whole topic and how it's addressing trauma. I didn't know that I actually had trauma before going in the military. I had somewhat of a confusing upbringing to that. I was looking for a place to belong, and I was looking, so that I was naturally walking into I was trying to find a tight knit group of men to be tough and to show me show me the way. And I definitely handled it pretty poorly without just being immature and naive. But I'm curious, what type of desire were you looking for in your life that had you walk into the recruiter's office?
Well, ever since I could say the word Marine, for whatever reason, I wanted to be a Marine. And I think at the time, especially, so I already made up my mind I was going to be in the Marine Corps at a very young age. But I think that when I finally did sign up, there were a few reasons. We were at war, and I wanted to go to war. 2, I wanted to be really tough and scary. I wanted to be, you know, a person that demanded respect through, you know, through that kind of fear. And 3rd, to be honest, I was getting out of high school and I had a really bad breakup with a girl, and my whole life felt like it was falling apart. So I was had suicidal ideation at that point, where I was like, what's the point of all this? So I might as well go to war and do that instead of the alternative, so at least it's worth something. So there was a whole cake of reasons, you know, from the beginning. And my family was my sister was a Marine before me, but she joined because she wanted to get out of the house as fast as possible, and the Marine Corps was the first one to take her. So I was always kind of resentful for her when I was a kid, because I was like, you did it before me, because I wanted to be a Marine since forever. But yeah, so there's lots and lots of reasons to do that. I wanted to go serve my country. I wanted to go fight, and I also wouldn't have mind at the time dying for my country.
Sure. Yeah. I look back and I think maybe not so much anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out the way it did for me as well.
Me too. This ride isn't so bad after all, turns out.
No.
Well, I appreciate you so much, Jared, for joining us, and I appreciate the guests that we had today being able to ask some questions. Thank you so much. If you're watching this on YouTube and would like to join us live for a future show, feel free to visit our meetup page where you could check out the events calendar and see what we have planned in the upcoming months. Our May event actually will our guest will be Chaplain Candy Werman, who's here with us. So join us for that. We meet on the third Sunday of every month at 11. So thanks a lot, guys.